What does it say? It says Mom off duty. So every year I get this out and I wear it. Usually I try to wear it all weekend, but it really works for me on Sunday and Mother's Day. What are some things that your mother does for you every day? This is going to be good. Feed you? What does your mother do? She helps you get your clothes out. Yeah, Lee? Oh, well, yeah, sometimes we have to discipline you. Yeah, how about you, Charlie? She takes care of you. Miss Lily? What does your mom do for you every day? Lets you play. Does she play with you too sometimes? Yeah. No. I'm sure she does. What else does your mom do for you? Helps you clean up your toys. Do you guys eat? Yeah? Your mom makes you food and she packs your lunch. So if your mom had a button like this that said Mom off duty, who's going to do all that stuff? Your father, that's right. Or you all can do those things, right? All of those things that your mom does for you on a day-to-day basis, on Mother's Day, somebody else can help out with those things. Now, for those of you that are in our Sunday school here, last week we told a story about Jesus when he healed somebody by the pool. And the Jewish leaders got really upset. Why were they so upset at Jesus for healing somebody? What? It was the wrong day. Jesus, come on. Yeah, Jesus healed somebody on the Sabbath, and they were very upset because they weren't supposed to do anything on the Sabbath. And when they confronted Jesus, you know what he said? He said, "My Father is always working, and so am I." Aren't we lucky that Jesus is never off duty? Could you imagine if Jesus took a day off? Oh my goodness, that would be the day something probably terrible would happen to me, and I would need him a lot. The day he decided to take a day off. So today, those things, and what are some things that Jesus does for us? Yeah. What are some things Jesus does for us, Braden? He helps us. What else? He forgives us. What if we're hurt? He heals us. Now, are those things that somebody else could do if Jesus took a day off? No. Nobody can do what Jesus can do. So we need to be so thankful that he is never off duty. And on a day like today, as you think about your mom and you do things for your mom so that she can get a break, be thankful that Jesus never takes a day off and never takes a break. Now, those of you that are in Kids Church, we have been studying the Lord's Prayer for several weeks now. We've been breaking it apart and studying it. And one of the things, the way that we've learned it is we've learned it in sign language. So if you guys, we're going to do that for you now this morning as a little treat. So those of you stand up that have been in Kids Church so they can see you. Come on, guys. Hunter, me, Rowan. Stand up, and Ernesto, Lorenzo, Erica, I know you all just joined us, but I know from last week that you know the Lord's Prayer, so you can help us say. Yes, come on, stand up there, okay? Come on, Hunter. I'm going to kneel down so you can see them. All right, you guys ready? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread,
She fell in love with this man. You hear the story, you're thinking, this sounds like just about 1,000 romantic comedies out there, and indeed it is, and it gets better. She marries into the family, and for 10 years things went wonderfully. But then tragedy struck. Her father-in-law had already passed away. Then she lost her brother-in-law and her husband. And in that family, that was all that was there. She had her father, her mother and father-in-law. She had her husband. She had her brother. Those were the people who were providing for them. And they all passed away. And this was at a time when women were not actively working. And they were left destitute and hopeless. And this is a story of Ruth in the Bible. If you have your Bibles with you, I encourage you to open there with me. Ruth is a small little book sandwiched in between Judges and 1 Samuel. And the story of Ruth is an amazing story. Here we're at the beginning of the story, though it seems like the story is already almost completed. You have this woman, she got married, wonderful relationship, married for 10 years, things were going well. Then her husband passes away and she's kind of left hopeless. But where the story goes from here shows such tremendous providence of God, and also shows a very, very wise mother. Naomi was Ruth's mother-in-law, and her wisdom, which ultimately rested on God's wisdom. Those foreign beliefs that this woman heard about were the beliefs of the Jewish people. It was about a God of love, about a God of commitment, about a God of faithfulness, about a God of redemption and hope. And here, Naomi, rooted in that wisdom of God, shared 5 pieces of wise advice that we can learn from her life and her actions that transformed Ruth's future from this future of hopelessness and poverty and destitution to a future of joy and hope and peace and strength far better than she could have ever hoped for in the midst of that tragedy. And so what 5 pieces of advice can we learn from Naomi's wisdom, this wisdom of a mom who loved her kids, even her kids that weren't her biological kids, so much? First of all, don't let your struggles make you self-centered. Naomi's sons and husband passed. and now she's left with nothing. Again, at that time, women weren't able to work like they are today. And that was a hard thing, and that wasn't a good thing. That women couldn't provide for themselves when they needed to. And so she was left in a foreign land with nothing, and she said, what do I do here? And when we are left in that position where we have nothing, we are hopeless, sometimes we turn to wanting everyone else to fix our problems. We want help here, we want help there. We become more self-focused when our desires and our needs grow so big that we can't seem to handle. But not Naomi. Out of her great love, this is how she responded in this situation. In Ruth chapter 1, verses 11 through 13. But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters." You see, her daughters wanted to stick with her. Orpah and Ruth said, we're going to stay with you. Naomi could have said, "Wonderful, I won't be alone. This is great." As we celebrate Mother's Day, the worst thing ever would be a mom who was alone. And of course, Naomi didn't want to be alone. But instead of turning inward and focusing on herself, she turns outward. And she says, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter for me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." She's telling them, look, I'm an old woman. There's no hope if you stick with me. There's no help if you stick with me. I can't provide for you. I can't give you a hope. I can't give you another son to marry. Go home where you have a family that will care for you and support you. Maybe you can find another husband who will be able to take care of you. Naomi, instead of turning in on herself and saying, "Oh, woe is me. All these terrible things have happened. Yes, stay with me. Help me. Go out. Get me food. Work. Do whatever it takes." Instead of turning in on herself in selfishness, in the midst of this great trial, she turned out and loved her daughters-in-law. They weren't even her biological children, and yet her love was such that she put their needs far above her own. And what an incredible lesson we can learn from so many moms. When our life seems a mess, we often will say something like, "How can I help others when my life is such a disaster? How can I do things for others when I can't even take care of myself? I need to take care of myself first, and then, once I get my life in order, maybe I can help someone else." And the truth is if that's our attitude, all we're ever going to do is take care of ourselves. If any of you have ever gotten your life in such a condition, you're like, "I've got it down. This life thing, I am winning at it. I'm great." It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. We can have times that are wonderful where things seem to be going well, but it won't be long before some tragedy strikes. We lose a loved one. And I know on Mother's Day, it's a time of rejoicing, of celebrating moms, but it's also a time when many people are sad and missing their moms. Life is hard. And we can't allow our struggles to make us self-centered. We need to learn from Naomi and many other moms who, even in their struggles, even in their trials, don't think of themselves first, but are thinking of God and those around them. When I think of this kind of selflessness, I think of Sonia Carson, the mother of Ben Carson, one of 24 children. I kind of want to know her mom. 24 kids. She got married at 13 years old. When her two boys were young, she left her husband because she had found out he had another family. As the boys were growing, she worked diligently and made them read 2 books and write a book report on those 2 books every week, even though she herself couldn't read. Now, I don't know about you guys, getting kids to do things can sometimes be a challenge. Could you imagine this? Your kid comes home from school, you're like, all right, back out to the library, you're getting 2 books, you're going to read them this week, and you're going to write me a book report. You're sitting there, you're like, that would be the battle of a century, and it would last a century, and maybe they would read the 2 books, and maybe they'd write the book report, but I doubt it. But she fought with those boys. She fought against others who were saying, you're being so foolish. How can you make these kids do all this extra work? Just let them go out and play. But she struggled for her boys. You know, she was a single mom who had to make it on her own. She had to work because she had no other option. So she worked laboriously, and she struggled, and she strove, and she sacrificed every day for her boys so that they could have a future. And this is the action of so many moms, that even in the midst of their own personal crises, their own personal turmoil, their own personal struggles and challenges, they turn out and love on their families and love on other people. And when moms do this, they're following the example of Jesus Christ, who, though he was God, did not come to be served, but to serve, and ultimately give his life as a ransom for men. This Mother's Day, let's learn from many wonderful moms out there. And don't let your struggles make you selfish and turn in on yourself. Instead, love other people. And what you're going to find out is as your focus turns off of yourself and turns on to helping other people, your problems seem a lot smaller and your joy grows exponentially. It was Charles Stanley who said this: motherhood is a great honor and privilege. Yet it is also synonymous with servanthood. Every day, women are called upon to selflessly meet the needs of their families, whether they are awake at night, nursing a baby, spending their time and money on less than grateful teenagers, or preparing meals. Moms continuously put others before themselves. And that also should be the attitude of every Christian, for it was the attitude of Jesus Christ, who, being in very nature God, didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking on the very nature of a servant, being found in human likeness and in appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. Our attitude should not be towards me. I need to take care of myself. I've got to get myself in good order before I can help anyone else. We need to take a lesson from many moms and start loving on people and find out that will take the trials and the struggles in our lives and minimize those, while at the same time bringing such joy through service. The next thing ties right in with that: accept help when it is wise. So after counseling her daughters to go back to their homes, Orpah left. Her one daughter-in-law did just what she said. She said, okay, I don't see any hope here. I think the wisest thing I can do is go back home. But Ruth did not. Ruth's response is incredible, and it's captured in chapter 1, verses 17 through 18. She said this: do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Naomi put her daughter-in-law first, but she also knew when to say, okay, you can help. You can stay with me. You can be a part of this, and we can work through this together. Many of us have the same tendency as Naomi. We don't have that self-focused tendency. We have too much of an other-focused tendency, so much so that we won't even let anyone help us. We are going through all sorts of trials. We're having all sorts of struggles. We're having problems at work, problems at home, problems with the car. And when someone says, hey, can I help in any way? We say, maybe later, not right now. I don't really need anything. I don't know. And so we have this attitude that, yes, we may have struggles, but we can do it all by ourselves. Let me just ask this question. How many of you have been blessed when someone has helped you? Just raise your hand. I think every hand is up. If it isn't, it should be. How many of you have been blessed when you have helped someone else? It's a win-win situation, guys. When it's wise, accept the help. That doesn't mean you have to accept help every single time it's offered. But when help is helpful, when it's really going to bless you in some way, just accept it. It's going to bless them. It's going to bless you. The body of Christ is going to be built up. God is going to be glorified. And good things will happen. Accept help when it's wise. And Naomi knew this. And she saw that she had given Ruth the opportunity to get help, to go and be home. And she saw that Ruth said, no, I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to follow not just you, but your God. And Naomi said, okay, it's wise for me to accept this help at this time. Another important thing we learned from Naomi is that we need to take time to mourn. So Ruth and Naomi, after Orpah departed, said, well, what are we going to do? We can stay here where we really don't have much opportunity, or we can go back to Israel. Ruth had left Israel with her 2 boys and her husband in hopes of finding work and food because there was a famine in the land of Israel. And so Naomi said, well, let's return back to my home where I have some relatives and maybe we can at least find enough food to survive. Maybe we can find a little bit more help there than what we can receive here. And so they returned back. And when people saw Naomi, they remembered her, of course, they said, but they saw her and they noticed that she was different. She was down. She looked like she was struggling. And this is what Naomi responded to them with when they said, basically, Naomi, what happened? In chapter 1, verse 20, Naomi said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Sometimes as Christians, we get it in our mind that we're supposed to be happy all the time. We're supposed to be like Disney World. You go, everyone's happy, everyone's smiling, all is well. But that's not the case. It's okay to mourn. And I know some of you today are heartbroken. You're heartbroken over the loss of those that you love. You're heartbroken over a wayward child. You're heartbroken over struggling relationships. You're heartbroken over a friend. You're heartbroken. And know that it's okay to mourn. It's okay to let people know. It's also okay to be strong. The important thing is that we are genuine. The important thing is that we're not just putting and plastering on a smile on our faces and saying like everything is good. That doesn't mean that you have to pour your heart out to every person who you come across. But get involved in a small group, in a group of people where we're in a Bible study that you can share those things with. That you can tell them your struggles and tell them your trials. That you can be yourself. We as Christians need to be genuine. Not just putting on a face, putting on a front. Saying everything's well. Naomi could have come back and they would have said, hey Naomi, what happened? She's like, oh, don't worry, everything's fine. Isn't that the standard answer? Hey, how are you? Fine. If anyone even stops to listen. Why? Because usually that's not really the time or the place to have a really long, drawn-out conversation. That's why we so need to be in small groups. We so need to be at the Wednesday night prayer meeting where we can share our struggles and pray for one another. We need to be in Bible study at 9:15 in one of the women's groups on Thursday that meets so that we can share these things and so that we can be genuine. I encourage you all to live as genuine Christians. And when we're broken, don't just plaster on a smile. Instead, go to God who can heal the hurt. Whatever your heartbreak is, right now, God can mend that broken heart. God can mend that. And God can show you how He can redeem that. Take time to mourn if you're struggling. It's okay. Jesus wept when Lazarus died. God mourns when and is angry over sin. It's not a sin to mourn. So be genuine. We also need to take hope in God's plan. Naomi of Ruth had returned to Bethlehem with little hope. And according to Jewish law, when people harvested a field, they wouldn't go back through and pick up all the little stuff that had fallen. Instead, they'd leave it there for those who were homeless, those who were starving, those who were in need. And people could come behind those who are harvesting the grain and pick up the little bits that are left over to provide enough that they could survive. And so, according to Jewish law, Ruth was there, and she knew that Naomi had this relative named Boaz, and she said, hey, can I go out and glean in these fields? That means, can I go behind the harvesters and collect whatever's left so we have something to eat? And in reading this, don't imagine you have these two well-fed, happy people living in this nice little, maybe small house with electric and maybe it's just one room, but they got a little cooktop and a toilet. Realize that they were in the most dire poverty. She wasn't saying, hey, can I go out and get a little bit extra because we're not being well fed? She said, can I get what we need to live? Can I go out so that we can survive? And so Naomi says, yes, you can go out. And Ruth goes out to the field, and it wasn't long before Boaz took notice of Ruth and said, hey, you know what? You're here, you're one of my distant relatives, and so just hang out in my field. Don't go to anyone else's fields. And then he told his servants, hey, make sure you leave some extra. Don't harvest everything. Leave some extra there for Ruth. And so Ruth came back and told Naomi, and in 2:20, Ruth chapter 2, verse 20, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. Naomi also said to her, the man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers. Naomi realized, wait a second, something a little bit bigger is going on here. He's not just giving you a little bit of extra food. I think that God may have a plan in this moment. You have these two widows struggling to get through life, and Naomi sees this little glimpse of hope. Hey, maybe, just maybe, and I think she had it in her head, maybe Boaz has an interest. And by Jewish law, when someone was widowed, the relatives, even the brothers, had a responsibility to marry that widow. Now we think about it, we're like, oh no. We're like, not a chance in life. But remember, at this time, women didn't have a very good opportunity to make a living on their own. So a woman who wasn't married often was in severe poverty and at risk of dying from starvation. So when you think about it like that, it's a safety net. It's the way that they were able to provide for these widows. And so this wasn't a brother, this was a more distant relative who had the responsibility of caring for this widow, of marrying Ruth. And so Naomi was like, okay, well, I see, maybe God's doing something here. Maybe God is bringing this opportunity along. And we too need to take hope in God's plan. This was in the midst of their trial. They had come back home. They were still mourning the loss of their husbands. They were struggling through life. They were getting by on scraps, what was left over after a field was harvested. And Naomi saw, maybe God has a plan and a purpose here. But then he didn't just sit there and wait for God to figure it out. And we too need to not sit still when opportunity arises. That's a key lesson from the book of Ruth and the wisdom of Naomi. She didn't just say, okay, we're going to sit tight and see what God does with this. She made a plan. And the plan seems really, really odd to us in part of it. Some of it seems normal, some of it seems really odd. So we're going to read chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. And this is kind of the plan that Naomi made. She said, okay, I see God working here. What can I do to further this work that God has already started? Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you that it may be well with you? She's like, let me find out how maybe you can get